on succession planning for nonprofits. I'm Sue McEntee with the Charitable Giving Resource Center in West Des Moines, Iowa. Couple of just housekeeping issues before we get started today. First, I'll get out of the way here so you guys aren't seeing my head. We're going to hold questions until the end. So as we're going through the presentation today, if you have a question, go ahead, type it in. Then when we get done, I'll pull the question component up and we'll take a look at those. If you are with us online, you will get access to a PDF of the PowerPoint in an email, and we'll also be posting it on the website. If you go out there, there is a little ticker tape that runs throughout the day, and on there you'll have access to all of the webinars that we've done, not only in October, but now the ones in November. We've got one more webinar coming up, and that's next week on the 13th at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Qualifying and cultivating major donors. You'll have to listen to me again next week if you join us, but that's a really fun one. I hope that many of you will come back and join us for that. And then on the 8th of December, I can't believe we're talking about holidays already, but we will have the CGRC Holiday Open House. For those of you that aren't in close proximity, sorry that you're not going to be able to join us. It's always a fun event, but come in and have something to eat and drink, and we'll celebrate a little bit before the holidays. We'll go ahead and get started today. Building leaderful organizations, succession planning for nonprofits. Our goal today, let me make sure I get my screen working here. We have two goals. First, to detoxify the topic of nonprofit succession planning. It is something that I got to tell you, in all the years that I was in plan giving or in fundraising as a frontline fundraiser, no one ever talked about this. And I never really realized the magnitude of the problem until I became a nonprofit consultant and started to see how often people change positions. So here's a little bit of a question. We're going to test those of you who receive our newsletter and see if you read it last month. Any idea on what the average turnover rate is for a nonprofit position versus a for-profit position? Well, I'll tell you. The average turnover for those individuals who are 18 to 38 years of age in the regular job sector is 3 to 5 years, meaning they change positions about 3 to 5 years in each position. In the nonprofit industry, it's 16 months, not even a year and a half, and we see it a lot in our industry. So the second goal is to really provide nonprofit board members, executive directors, and even frontline fundraisers a framework of their own to build your own succession plan. So what is succession planning? Well, it generally revolves around finding and grooming an executive's heir apparent. Who do you want to step into that position next? It's a lot like a runner in a relay race, seamlessly receiving that leadership baton and carrying it forward into the future. So why is this not the case for nonprofits? Well, one, it's rare for nonprofits to even think about succession planning. Most nonprofits are relatively small and are supported by 1 or 2 leadership roles. And when you only have a couple of leadership roles, to concentrate on succession planning for that one position can just put too much weight and expense at the top. Even large nonprofits avoid this issue because nobody wants to compromise their authority and nobody wants to feel like the lame duck. Well, I guess they're just planning for me to leave. That's not what succession planning is for. Succession planning is for a seamless transition regardless of the circumstances. Many volunteer boards don't want to contend with the time and leadership demands that succession planning requires. It is something that you can create the plan, but it's something that you need to think about once or twice a year. Review the plan. What happens if? And finally, funders who have built trust and comfort with a nonprofit through a particular leader might pull back if there's any indication that that person is going to depart. Without succession planning, a nonprofit undergoing the stress of a senior level position departing can find itself in a destabilizing position or even in danger of crumbling. What I have seen over the years is that when a position becomes vacant in a nonprofit organization, there's this little lull. It's almost like the heartbeat goes on a standstill. Nothing happens for a period of time until they find someone new to fill it. Then everything gets to be recharged. And who are the people that suffer the most in these? It's our donors. They're used to having you call on them. They're used to your face showing up the door or your voice being on the phone call. And all of a sudden, there's someone new. And that can cause some stress. So how do you do succession planning in the nonprofit arena successfully? It really has to be in alignment of your staff development with your strategic vision. And a lot of people will say, oh, my staff go to conferences and they hear all kinds of information about fundraising and planned giving. But when was the last time anybody talked to any of you about succession planning and what to do when a position comes open? What's the case for succession planning? Well, it's a sound risk management practice. If you were in the for-profit industry, I would bet you that there would be some sort of a succession plan in place so that there was a continuity of your services with the departure of one person and the entrance of the next. It ensures the viability of an agency in the event that a key person leaves. Again, we'll go back to that. You kind of go on that straight line of a heartbeat. Suddenly, there's no one there to keep things moving, so you have the lull. We don't like to see those peaks and valleys in our relationships with our donors. If a large enough nonprofit can sustain services through even a temporary loss of one or more administrators due to sickness or emergency, it can really help to stabilize the foundation of that organization. A nonprofit that gives attention to talent-focused succession planning can be more nimble and flexible. That means looking at who you have in the corridors of your organization. Where are those skill sets at that you can bring to the table when that executive director leaves? It may be a case of, in a short-term period, you have one or two or even more individuals that come together to do the tasks of one senior person. But have you talked to those individuals about that, and are they ready to step into that role for a short period of time? What does that do for that particular individual? It shows them that you really look to them at possibly going to that next level. There's that accountability that we often don't give to our employees, and they don't see that there's potential to go to that next position. Executive jobs can become more doable. They don't have to be the hands-on in every element of the operation of your organization. If you look to teaching others within your organization pieces of the job that you do, you can rest assured that even for short-term departures, things are going to happen without there being that blip on the radar screen. It can energize and reassure your board and your donors by providing the occasion for a high-level strategic development and demonstrating that staff is respected and supported because you've given them ownership. And lastly, leaders who can overcome the initial reservations about succession planning ultimately find that it generates unforeseen opportunities and excitement for the future of your nonprofit. We're not always wondering, how long is he or she going to be here? Oh, here we go again. There's someone else in this position. Now what does that mean? It's part of that strategic vision of your organization and your future look. A succession planning takes root as a standard of practice. If all of us in the nonprofit industry start to think about succession planning, it's going to make all of us stronger and more effective in pursuing our impact in our communities. There's really 3 ways of thinking about succession planning, and we're going to talk about each one of them. These concepts were developed by a leadership transition consultant called Compass Point Nonprofit Services out of California, and at Transition Guides in Silver Springs, Maryland. These concepts are not mutually exclusive. There are other concepts and ideas out there, but these are the 3 that, after doing a lot of research and looking into how nonprofits could create their own succession plans, that I believe are the most pertinent to the groups of people that we work with. So the first type of succession planning is strategic leadership development. It's an ongoing practice that's based on really defining your agency's strategic vision, identifying the leadership and the managerial skills that are necessary to carry out that vision. What does it take for us to get to that next step? And then recruiting and maintaining talented individuals who have some of those skills or who can develop those skills. So it's really looking ahead at where you might need to be should someone leave your organization. The second one is called emergency succession planning or emergency leadership planning. This ensures that key leadership and administrative functions, as well as any of the services that your agency may provide, can continue without disruption in the event of an unplanned or temporary absence of an administrator. In the last few weeks, I've had 2 nonprofits send out emails that their executive director or their chair of the board was having to take a leave of absence due to health issues or medical issues. And that happens all the time. So what happens if somebody has to be out 6 or 12 weeks? Does everybody just go on hold, or do you have a process or a practice in place that helps everyone understand what their role is in those 6 to 12 weeks and assuring that your organization can continue to move forward? The third one is called departure-defined succession planning. That generally occurs when you have a long-term leader who says, folks, I want you to know that I plan to retire when I'm 67, or I plan to leave this position, my wife or my husband has taken a job elsewhere, and I plan on leaving in 12 to 18 months. Most people say it's departure 2 or more years in advance. I believe that this type of succession planning can be used in a year or more as well. So let's take a closer look at each one of these types of succession planning and know that not all of them may be right for you, but I would bet that by the end of this 45 minutes, you're going to see that one of the 3 is potentially something that you not only want to look at, but pursue putting in place for your organization. So the strategic leader development or succession plan. This type of forward thinking, looking to the future in planning, it works at expanding your organization's pool of capable leadership. Who do you have in the ranks that is showing that they have some of the skills, the techniques, or the tools that your organization would need to continue in the future? As Jim Collins in Good to Great has written, it's getting the right people on the bus or the right butts in the seat. This might mean that you have to train some people or that you already have talented staff on board. You might have to make new hires that have those particular aspects that you're needing. In the final analysis, any succession plan is only as good as the people who are there to execute it. If you have not done a good job of making sure that all of those components are in place and they understand what their role is and that they can fulfill that role, then it's just a plan that you have on a shelf. Again, in small nonprofits, there might simply be too few workers to do an extensive strategic leadership development or a strategic succession plan. In these cases, one of the other succession planning processes is probably relevant for them. So in the leadership and management preparation, what do I have to do to prepare people? What gaps exist when that leader leaves? And a lot of times you can see these when someone goes on vacation. What are some of the things that can't occur when that person or that position is not present? Who fills those gaps? Is it one person steps in to do it fully, or is it multiple people that come in and work together to do and execute the things that that person was doing? And then what do people who want to step into that role need to learn? Is it something that's on the job training? Do they need formal education? Are there leadership or networking groups that they could begin participation in to gain some of that valuable expertise? And is it just a matter of testing to see what they're capable of doing? I love this quote. When a man does not know which harbor he is headed for, no wind is the right wind. And in succession planning, if you don't understand where you're going, how can you put a roadmap in place to get there? The second succession planning is the emergency succession planning. The primary goal of this planning process is to prepare an organization for an unplanned departure of a key manager. The most critical circumstance would be losing an executive director. Again, what's the average length of time people stay in nonprofit positions? It's 16 months. And so this may happen routinely. We hope that our executives, our senior level positions will stay longer, but we don't often see that. The steps involved in setting up these plans, beyond preparing for emergencies, can help you launch an agency into long-term strategic leader development. Again, you're looking out into the audience of employees that you have at your organization. What kinds of skills and abilities do they have, and where could they be plugged in? What could their part be if a senior executive moves on and you need to go into a search? There's a number of steps in emergency succession planning, and I'll go through these not in real depth, but just kind of quickly. So as we said earlier, identifying the critical leadership and management functions of that executive director, that director of development, that chair of the board, whatever that position is. And then you need to agree upon what functions could be covered by an acting director. You know, what are the extent of that person's limitations? The worst thing you could do is not understand, as that person who steps into those shoes, what can I and can't I do, and what am I responsible for? So make sure that everyone understands, including your board, what an acting director or acting person has for authority and limitations in that position, and is it multiple positions, and you're kind of cutting up those responsibilities a little bit. Also agree upon who has the authority to appoint that acting director. Is it your board? Is it the departing executive director? Is it a subcommittee of your board? All things that you want to think about to make sure that you're ready should this occur. Agree upon standing appointees to the position of the acting director. You know, what happens if this person is in it for a few weeks and says, no, I can't do this, what's your backup? And are you compensating this individual in any way for stepping up and taking on additional responsibilities? And again, it may not be just one person. It may be multiple people within your organization who step up to fill just aspects of that particular position. Develop a cross-training plan for those backups. Make sure that they have an opportunity to develop their abilities and the key things that they bring to the table so that they can carry on those functions should this circumstance occur. What will your board of directors do to support or supervise an acting director or acting people when they serve in those roles or step into those roles temporarily? Drafting a communications plan is essential. I can remember being in nonprofit positions and having staff members leave, and we wouldn't send anything out to the donors that they served. So what happened? The donors would have a new face or a new voice call them, and they're like, what happened to Sherry? How come she's not here anymore? So whether it is an emergent position, a position you know is going to be filled with someone else, please take time to draft a communication plan, not only for internal or into a larger organization, but also out to your donors. And then outline the procedures that need to be followed in the event that an emergency absence becomes a permanent, unplanned absence. Identify the core executive functions. So providing comments on plan drafts, maybe the executive director is looking ahead and saying, gosh, folks, we need to create this succession plan. So they'll present some comments on what they think should happen in that succession plan. Take it to the board, present it to the full board for review, potential changes, and I hope ultimate adoption. And then work either with a consultant who might help you or together on the board's procedures to manage that executive transition in the event of a permanent absence. There are other leaders who might consider having an emergency succession plan. Maybe it's board members who hold leadership positions. It's not just executive directors. It could be your CFO in an organization. Who are some of the key people that if they were gone for a long period of time, either emergent or meaning you have to fill the position, what are those positions that you think, gosh, I really need to know what I would do if that happens? The board can organize itself to support this planning by providing a subcommittee of peers to act as a sounding board if needed. Test your plan. Regardless of the plan that you decide you want to use, you should test it. It's a lot like when you were in grade school and they would do tornado drills and they'd have you sit under your desk or go out into the hallways. Maybe this executive director or the CFO is taking a vacation. Test it. So before they leave, this individual, the executive director, CFO, chair, whatever, will instruct to contact them only in the event of an agency emergency and really stress what that term emergency means. When that individual returns, debrief the managers and the board. Were there lessons that they learned? Were there gaps in the plan? Were there things that were not covered while that person was away and you had to figure out what that answer should be? You might change some of the succession plans that you had. Frequently, acting leaders will introduce management innovations that remain in place even after the return of this individual. They may look at this and say, gosh, I wonder if they've ever thought about doing it this way. A fresh look or a fresh approach to your succession plan is always a good thing to have. Some duties assigned to backups during sabbaticals might remain with them. You may find that, gosh, I was gone and John took over this aspect of my job, and in reality, that was probably a really good thing. It likely was something that that executive, that board chair, that CFO thought that they had to keep the reins on. But when they've been gone and they see that someone else is really capable of doing it, it frees that executive to giving attention to maybe other neglected domains of your organization. The third succession plan is called Departure Defined. This is recommended for any long-tenured executive directors or positions who has a definitive departure in mind. I will tell you that sometimes this particular succession plan is put into place and somebody says, I'm thinking I want to retire in 2-3 years. And so the board and the rest of the staff are thinking, okay, 2 or 3 years. We get down the road 3 years and, maybe I want to stay 2 or 3 more years. So it is one of those plans that if you implement, you put into place, and you have a particular person or you're the position who's looking to depart at a particular time, make sure that you've looked at the personal things that go along with that. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. This succession plan includes identifying the agency goals. Where are we at now? Where's our vision for the future? And has it changed who we might look for in this position compared to when we looked for our current executive director or CFO previously? Not saying that person wasn't the right one, but it's an opportunity to look at, is there a way to make our agency stronger by maybe tweaking what we need? What tools does this successor need to have to step into that role? And how are you going to know or understand that this individual has those key skills and those mindsets to really fill that role? And then devote a significant attention to building the capacity of the board, the managers and the systems to sustain that funding and the operations beyond that current executive's tenure. You can fill that position in 3 to 6 months, but in every situation we all know it takes a little bit of time to get ramped up to really understand what's happening within an organization. So regardless of who you put into that position, and a lot of people will say, oh, I can hit the ground running on day one. Well, you likely understand all the foundational pieces of a nonprofit, but each nonprofit is a little bit different, and it might take just a little bit to get acclimated to that. The nuts and bolts of the defined or departure defined succession plan are really pretty extensive. I'm not going to go through these in detail again, but really looking at some of the key things that you need to look for. So as I said a few minutes ago, deal with the personal and professional barriers for that person departing. For example, future employability concerns. Is this person leaving because you've restructured your organization and you say, in 12 months, this position will no longer exist? Does this individual have concerns that they won't be able to get a new position? Do they have inadequate retirement savings and they're looking at going into retirement? That could cause someone to do, just as I said, say I'm going to leave in 2 to 3 years, and in 2 to 3 years say, oh, I think it might be 2 to 3 years more. Start to delve into why is this continuing to be pushed on? Is there something there that the board or the organization can do to help support that individual in their decision? There may be some unfinished business in the current job. I just talked to an executive director in a large nonprofit down in southern Kansas. This individual was slated to retire on October 1st. There were some changes with staff that they weren't anticipating, and because of that, he retired, but now he's sitting back in the position until they can find, they've got a replacement that isn't going to start for a little bit, but now they need to help define these other roles that are empty and get the new person on board. 2, set the departure date. Important to know what's the end date. Let's work back from that and all the things we need to do. Form that succession planning committee to really look at the succession plan that you've put in place. How do we execute it now? We talked about communication plans. Are there any vulnerabilities that might pop out? Was this person the key connector to particular funders, maybe corporate funders? How do we make sure we have conversations with them long before this person leaves? Designing and implementing those strategies to address those vulnerabilities, identifying the broad strategic directions, and most of you should have at least a 3 to 5 year plan. Some will go out further, but 3 to 5 really is, I think, the most important to have. Solidify that management team. Even if you're in a small organization with 1 or 2 people, make sure that you understand what the roles and responsibilities are of each other and what are some of the cross-training things that you can do to serve each other if there were to be a defined departure of one of you. Build the board's leadership. Make sure that you've got the right people there. Back up key executive relationships. That kind of goes back to any of those vulnerabilities that you have. Make sure your finances are in order. Build up financial reserves, because if a key position goes vacant for too long, you may have donors who sit back and just want to wait and see what's happening. That could cause some of your annual giving to slow down just a little bit until they see that things are back on track. So make sure you have financial reserves. Again, agree on the parameters of the ED's role and set the executive search strategy. If we know this person is leaving, we know when they're going to be gone, we're implementing the succession plan that we have, what's the search strategy to replace them? We've talked about some of those parameters in earlier slides, looking at roles and responsibilities, looking at the key kind of values that they brought to the table. What skill set did they have that they were most successful with? Are those the same kind of things that you're going to look for in the new person in that position? Succession planning is really difficult for a lot of us to even think about, but it can turn an executive exit from a difficult challenge into an occasion for organizational growth and maturation. It really can build everyone's bottom line, particularly when you start looking at others within your organization and what key kind of skill sets they bring to the table. And if you've been tapping into those and helping them understand, if things should happen, this is a thing, or this is a particular role that we'd like you to play. Oh my gosh, that just gives so much excitement to individuals to know that someone sees them in their role and maybe a future role for this organization. but all too often we don't talk to them about what those next steps could be. At the very best, succession planning can provide your organization with a blueprint for sustainability, something that can help you thrive far into the future, a part of those strategic plans. You need to be thinking about, we've got this wonderful 3 to 5 year strategic plan, but what happens if a key person pulls out? How do they fit into that plan, and what exposure do we have? Here's just a component of a nonprofit assessment tool that I often give to nonprofits. If I've not given this to you, shoot me an email and let me know that you'd like this. It's out of a group out of Oregon, and I just think it's the single best thing I've found in a long time. It takes you through lots of different components of your organization, from financial to HR to just operational, special events issue, staff training, and it makes you think, are these functions that we have in place, and are we adhering to them? Are we fully achieving them? Are we partially? We don't know, or we're not doing it at all, but we know we should. It's a really good check and balance, particularly as you look at implementing a succession plan or potentially a departure of someone in your organization. A lot of times people will say, well, doesn't this just show where we're weak? I don't believe it's a weakness. I think it's an opportunity to understand where you can strengthen your organization. Take a look at all of the different positions within your organization and ask yourself, what are the specific tasks that each of these individuals have to do? I want to tell a little story here. Last time I did this webinar, I did it with a colleague who does succession planning with for-profits. And he had a large family-run operation, and it started with a husband and wife, and now it had children and aunts and uncles and in-laws were all helping. And the wife came to the husband and said, you know, I just have to take some of these things off my plate. And he said, you don't have that much there. You're doing just fine. I need you to keep doing what you're doing. So we pulled them through this process and saw just how many X's were in this wife's role. Suddenly he sat back and said, I had no idea all that I had put on your plate over the years, and I just assumed that that's where they need to be. It helps them redefine roles and responsibilities. And again, this can help with succession planning as you move forward. It's an opportunity to sit back and say, who's doing what? I've been in those situations where somebody leaves and they don't fill the position. You say, oh, you know, I'll take that on, or I'll take this on. All of a sudden you look at what's on your plate and you think, holy cow, how can I do all of this? And often we say nothing. So if you are in a leadership role, I would encourage you, even if you don't do succession planning, that you do this simple process or task, and that is just to assess what are people doing, and are those tasks in the right place. I've got a couple of things I want to share with you. Colin Powell, the day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day that you have stopped leading them. They have either lost confidence that you can help them or concluded that you do not care. Either case is a failure of leadership. Succession plan is an opportunity to show your employees and your board that you have confidence in them, that should you depart or one of them depart, that together you can execute a plan to keep things moving. Gandhi, I suppose leadership at one time meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people. A culture of communication and trust is always important in transition. If you have a succession plan in place and you have not adequately given everybody the right roles and responsibilities and tools to step into that role, they are not going to trust that this plan is going to work. Make sure that you have an open door policy or a policy of open communication so that people can say, I'm concerned about this. I don't know that I could step into this role. These are things I need from you to help. A great opportunity at evaluation time to start to sort out some of the things that maybe are on their plate, some of the things that you see they have strengths in, and there may be an opportunity for them to step in and take charge should an opening prevail. Don't wait until the dreaded D to take action. That being the, we've had a number of, or I have, emails come through of people who have had an untimely death of someone on their staff. Maybe there's disability or poor health. There could be just simple dysfunction within the ranks of your employees and somebody leaves. Maybe there's a disruption, a change in the industry, as we all felt a number of years ago when the stock market decided to have a little bit of a disruption. And finally, discord between or within staff. If you are sensing that there is something that's not right, go with your gut feel and dig in a little deeper. Try to figure out what's going on. If you allow discord, disruption, or dysfunction to continue to occur, and you have a significant person's position come open, that is just going to escalate, and things are not going to be easy for the next person that comes in. So what's next for you? Well, gain greater clarity on which one of these methods you'll choose and what's your organization's vision for the next 3 to 5 years. How can you incorporate a succession plan into your strategic planning? Discuss and brainstorm where the successor might come from and what you can encourage that to happen. Again, people in leadership positions don't want to feel like they're the lame duck or that there's a potential. Are they just trying to figure out a way to get rid of my position? Help them understand that this is a way for all of you to be stronger in the future. Begin this contingency planning. Start cross-training. Develop your employees. Get some written processes in place. Make sure that people know where information is located. This is something you can ask each of your employees to do. Again, a great thing to do at evaluation time. Can you just do a quick little list of the kinds of tasks that you're responsible for, and could you help me understand what it takes to accomplish those tasks? Then if that person ends up being away because of an extensive illness or a new job opportunity, now you have a textbook of what needs to happen. But you need to take that one small step. There's a couple of great websites that I would encourage you to go out and take a look at. One is compasspoint.org and the other is Transition Guides. Both of them will offer you some information and opportunity even to utilize their services if you want to help create succession plans and often become search engines for positions that you might have that have been vacated. We are going to go to questions at this point in time. We like to leave the last 15 to 20 minutes to any questions. Let's go down and see what we have here for questions. So again, the reason that I like to do this particular webinar at least once a year is to just plant the seed of what do you do should a position come open and how can you be prepared for that. I've been in situations where suddenly our plan giving officer had a new opportunity or a spouse moved. Suddenly it's open and you're right in the middle of doing something with a donor. Now this key person is gone. What happens? How do you handle that? So my hope for today is that we have provided at least a little bit of information for you to start thinking about whether any of these three processes are something that you should put in place to help strengthen your organization. I don't see any questions at this point in time, so again, I'll just remind you next week we've got another webinar. It's on qualifying and cultivating major gift donors. As we look at our year-end and annual appeals and the way we want to start next year, this is a great time to start looking at your donor database and starting to determine who are some individuals that maybe you want to start to cultivate as a major donor. But how do you look at your donor database and determine who those people are and how do you bring them into that new pipeline for potential major gifts and ultimately a planned gift? Well, I want to thank all of you for participating today, and should you have any questions, my information is at the end. Give me a call or shoot me an email. Oh, maybe it's not going to go to that one. The other one. Just go down one here. Thanks, Tim. Go back to, there we go. So here's an email and a phone number if you have any questions. Have a great rest of the week. It looks like it's going to be beautiful here in central Iowa. A little cold, but it is November, and I know the holidays are upon us, but enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for participating.